Coming up next on Arizona Horizons Journalists Roundtable, gay marriage in Arizona is now legal. We'll discuss today's historic court ruling. And the final debate between Doug Ducey and Fred Duval is in the books. Those stories next on Arizona Horizons Journalists Roundtable.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizons Journalists Roundtable. I'm Ted Simons. Joining us tonight, Mary Jo Pitzel of the Arizona Republic, Mike Sunnix of the Phoenix Business Journal, and Luigi Del Puerto of the Arizona Capital Times. It is official. The courts have ruled that Arizona's same-sex marriage ban is now history. Mary Jo, talk to us. Take us through what happened here. This is one of those deals where a year or 2 years ago, you would never think this would have happened.
Right, but then we have had a succession of states' bans being overturned. 2 weeks ago, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals overturned bans in Idaho and Utah, or Nevada,
yeah.
and Idaho. And since Arizona is in the same circuit as those two states, it was inevitable that this decision would come down to Arizona. And at the end, it all sort of turned on Attorney General Tom Horne, who seemed to be sort of prolonging this, saying we need to sort of exhaust all the options. Yet this morning, after Judge Sedgwick ruled that the marriage ban in I'm going to get my states mixed up, but he upheld it. He rejected further appeals. Horne said, "What are we waiting for? I'm done. I'm going to issue a letter to the county clerks and allow them to start issuing marriage licenses."
Yeah, Horne said the chances of the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco, pretty liberal appeals court, of changing the ruling on this is zero. The Supreme Court hasn't shown an inclination to do this either. California, Nevada, Idaho, all these states has been overturned. And so suddenly today we've had same-sex marriage ceremonies and certificates being granted.
Surprised that Horne didn't try to stretch this out. So, I mean, as Mary Jo said, he basically said it wasn't legally ethical to do so, considering he had no chance of winning.
No, a couple of days ago, we had asked the Attorney General's office about the fact that, to a certain extent, this case hinges on what he does, whether he would appeal the case, whether he would continue fighting the case. And at that point, his office was pretty clear about wanting to move on, to press forward, to continue fighting and defending this law. I think what you said was really interesting. I mean, we have pontificated on this very show about how this day is soon arriving. And yet, when I woke up this morning to learn that it is in fact happening, it was a bit of a shock. I think that's true for both sides of this debate.
It's a bit of a shock to the point where, I mean, if this had happened a year ago, you would see people marching in this, you'd see all sorts of reaction. It's almost as if, yeah, we saw this coming, yeah, they're going to go get married.
Well, again, I think that because we've seen these bans being overturned in a lot of states, and then, 2 weeks ago, you could see this one coming, and it became then a question of when, not if. And the when was likely to happen sometime in 2014. That it happened today and not next month, maybe a little bit of a surprise. But as somebody observed to me, those first couples that were in there to get married, how did they know to be down there and ready and sort of in their Sunday best with their families there? I mean, did they wake up every day and and get ready for this?
But we had thought we did a show last night with Howie Fisher, basically waiting for the word, because it could have happened literally at any time after that week was over and the replies and the briefs were all filed. Happens this morning.
Well, yeah, and Horne lost in the primary. He's a lame duck. I don't know if that impacted whether he decided with a fight or not. The reaction from Mark Brnovich, who beat him, and Doug Ducey was, we'll abide by the court's decision. The writing's on the wall. The most vociferous opposition came from Kathy Herod from CAP and Jan Brewer, who really lambasted the decision, quoting Scalia and saying, the federal courts have really overstepped their bounds in these cases. But for the most part, Republicans have been pretty muted.
Right. And yet, even though the governor had lambasted the court for its opinion, for its ruling, she agreed with the decision of the Attorney General not to appeal the case because, as Mike pointed out, there's no point. I mean, you are going to the same court that already invalidated the bans in other states. What's the point?
Yeah, I don't know so much that Jan Brewer agreed with what Tom Horne did, but she did not contest it, and I think there might be a nuance there. And what the opponents, what they're upset about is that voters as recently as 2008 said marriage in Arizona is between one man and one woman, and that was the will of the voters, and they feel that we have a court that has now overturned the people's will, and that's why Horne said, look, I'm not on board with this decision, but I've got nowhere to go, so I'm going to stop wasting money and wasting time. But I think the will of the people is what should prevail.
And the governor did say that she was deeply disappointed, deeply troubled. The court thwarted the will of the people. That was the quote, eroded authority of states to regulate and uphold their own laws. Kathy Herod, heartbroken for the country and for the state. She's grieving for children who now have no chance to grow up with a mom and a dad, and mourning the loss of a culture and of an ethical foundation. Does any of this impact any of the state races going on, and specifically the governor's race, because Doug Ducey has Kathy Herod within his inner circle?
Yeah, Herod compared this to Roe v. Wade. She compared this to the abortion rulings back in the 70s. But Ducey's response today was he supported Horne's decision. He'll abide by the court's rulings. He's been a very nuanced conservative, very conservative campaigner. Nothing he said today kind of cast that. Does this maybe energize Democrats a little more for Fred Duval? I don't know. It seems like it's a little bit separate from the statewide campaigns, especially the Attorney General's race, because Horne's not in there and he didn't appeal it. Rodolini, the Democrat, was kind of quick to say, we shouldn't appeal this, we shouldn't drag this out, and then Tom went out and kind of did what she said. I don't know what kind of impact it's going to have on statewide races.
Yeah, it's hard to read what kind of impact this would have on the campaigns. What we do know is that this no longer will be an issue in the general election. We already have same-sex marriage. It's already happening. It seems like from the responses that we have seen from the candidates, it seems like they have accepted this as inevitable, something that we have to live with. And so I'm not sure if this moves the needle either way.
And I talked to some folks today who said they don't see that there's going to be much impact. First of all, people have been voting for 10 days now, or by the weekend they will have voted by about 10 days. And Maricopa County has about 165,000 votes already in, and the candidates' positions are well known on this. This doesn't sort of blow anything up. If anything, if you're on the losing side, the theory that if you're upset and angry, maybe that animates you more than when you win. Now, you can't go out and cast a vote against gay marriage. There's no hope for that, but you might want to side with candidates who have not been sympathetic to gay marriage. I
think the quandary kind of on both sides is public opinion polls have moved kind of with the courts. There's more support for allowing same-sex marriage nationally and in states. But the electorate as a whole is older and more conservative, so the voters might not be as supportive. But it's kind of a mixed message. So it's something there that where a Democrat would latch onto this and think it would propel them, where a Republican would be at a disadvantage. But you did see Democrats kind of sprinting in support of this. Greg Stanton, Fred Duval, Felicia Rodolini, Barbara Grijalva all had statements out very quickly, whereas Republicans were, besides the governor and Kathy Herod, were pretty quiet.
Yeah, and to Mike's point about public opinion, Tom Horne, was saying that, although he doesn't support gay marriage, I mean, he's happy for the people that are getting married, and he said that it's probably, he suggested that if this went back to the people again, that there probably would be support for gay marriage. I mean, things are changing, and they're changing rather rapidly, and Arizona becomes the 31st state to legalize gay marriage.
Things are changing, Luigi. How much do they change, and how much, I think Kathy Herod actually said something along the lines of the fight isn't over, we will continue working. How much can this be worked against? And I mean, just logistically, what goes on now that same-sex partners can get married?
It's very hard to see the United States Supreme Court taking up this issue at some point in the future and saying, well, all you guys that have been married all this time, we're just going to invalidate all your marriages. So for practical purposes, I think this is the end of the discussion in the sense that we are going to have same-sex marriage. Kathy Herod vows to continue to fight. She equates this to Roe v. Wade, the landmark decision on abortion, and by equating it to that decision, she's saying that, look, in 1973, we thought that this was the end of it. It was not. Look at what's going on with the abortion fight nowadays. We are moving the ball forward. She thinks that within our lifetime we will see the end of abortion. Of course, they want to focus on Roe v. Wade. I think others would want to focus on another issue over marriage, which is the laws that prohibited people of not the same race to marry. And people would look at that and say, look, this is a civil rights issue. It was decided many decades ago, and it has moved forward. A train has left the station. We're not going back.
Well, the Roe v. Wade decision, left some powers to the states. There's gray areas in which what states can do, and Arizona's been one of the states that's always kind of pushed that envelope in terms of what weeks or restrictions are there. This is more of a really black and white ruling. You want to get married, there's equal protection in the law, you can do it. I don't know what wiggle room the conservatives have on that.
That's what I'm asking. Can you chip away at this the way opponents of abortion rights have been chipping away at that?
I'm not sure. I haven't heard people making that argument, but I think that this feeds into ancillary issues such as discrimination. As someone pointed out today, it is still in Arizona, there is no protection against discrimination based on sexual orientation. So we get back into the SB 1062 types of fights. I think that's the next frontier, and maybe that base is a little more energized or perhaps a little more weakened because of today's events. I think we've got to see how that plays out.
It's interesting. It's also interesting to note that there are some laws that give preference to married couples in our state. For example, in adopting a kid out of the state's foster care system, the law gives preference to married couples. Of course, when they passed that law, they had heterosexual couples in mind. Now we have gay couples. I wonder what the legislature would do to that law. And similar measures is still in the books. Moving forward, that would be interesting to see how they deal with that.
And that's my question: is okay? We now know you can get married in Arizona if you're a same-sex couple, but there are all sorts of satellite issues.
Sure, you'll have lots of equal protection challenges to state laws and probably local ordinances that favor married couples or don't include same-sex couples. Employers are going to have to go through and look at their benefits, their policies, Family Leave Act, those health benefits, those types of things, and see if they have to change those. I mean, other states are going through this, and the big difference is immigration. We were ground zero. We were at the forefront of this. We're the 32nd state, 31st state to do this. So it's a little fait accompli for folks.
What really was interesting about Kathy Herrod's statement this morning was when she said, "We mourn a culture that continues to turn its back on God and His principles." To those who grew up in churches and are steeped in the language of the Scripture, this is very familiar lamentation, if you will. But still, it's an extraordinary claim to say that because the United States now allowed same-sex marriage, that it's turning its back on God and His principles. And of course, if you look at the Old Testament, there's a subtext there, and the subtext there is that if you disobeyed, you are inviting the wrath of God. So it's very interesting for her to bring this one up.
Well, but it's not surprising, is it?
No, it's not.
No.
It's not, because this organization has always been advocating based on a religious viewpoint. And it's the evangelical Christian viewpoint. That's what they're advocating for. Of course, I must note that the Christian churches are divided on this issue. They're deeply divided. Not all Christian churches are opposed to same-sex marriage.
There were Christian churches performing weddings.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's right.
And speaking of performing weddings, are the county clerks ready for all this? Is this?
They seem to be. I mean, even I think in Pima County, where they were saying, well, we use a vendor to print up our marriage licenses. We're going to have to change the format. Yet today, the clerk of the court was saying, we're issuing licenses. We're rolling. Again, they saw this coming. This wasn't a big surprise. That it happened on October 16th and not November 27th, is probably the biggest difference. But the indications are the clerks are, they're rocking and rolling.
I think it's interesting that Kathy Herrod is the voice of social conservatism in the state. 1062, everybody ran for cover on the Republican side except her. Today, she was one of the more prominent folks out there. 5-10 years ago, you probably would have seen a lot more people talk about this. Members of Congress, Trent Franks was pretty quiet today, very conservative member. But you had the governor and you had Kathy Herrod and not much else. And it kind of shows where the focus is in terms of kind of that social conservative strain of our politics.
One not up for re-election, the other not up for any election.
Right, but it is true. She is the voice of the social conservative movement in the state. She's been, and her organization have been the voice on this issue for, I don't know, 20 years now, 15, 20 years now, they have been at the forefront of this issue. They own this issue.
But nobody else really on these issues. She's the one. The Catholic Church, pretty quiet. They're kind of changing their tune on the issue, back
They did
in the
express disappointment, though.
Yeah. But not out as vocal as you might have seen in the past, maybe under past bishops. Your Republican delegation, pretty quiet. Republican leadership, the legislature, pretty quiet. Even the kind of what Brnovich and Ducey came out and said was certainly not combative.
Did anybody call Pope Francis? I mean, look, and I say that only half in jest. I mean, look what has happened with our conferences and his message that the church needs to include homosexuals as part of of the congregation.
The LDS Church as well. Do we hear anything from the LDS Church?
We haven't heard anything from the LDS Church. Of course, they're opposed to same-sex marriage. And I think you hit an important note there. The Catholic Church is changing it. The Pope has changed his attitude towards same-sex marriage. The doctrine itself has not changed.
Right.
It's still very much opposed to same-sex marriage. I don't think we'll see the Center for Arizona and Policy and Kathy Herod going away anytime soon. I think they'll be here. They'll dig in. They'll fight. They'll still be an important voice in this issue. And I think what I foresee happening is that they'll move to the next frontier, which is religious freedom, making sure that even though there's more equality in marriage in all other areas of the American life, that the religious are not silenced, that they are able to do what they want to do, that the churches are able to perform what they've always done, for years.
So you're talking 1062 plus 0.1.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Let's move on here. We had our final governor's debate, at least between Ducey and Duval. Anything new here in front of a women's group, so women's issues were at the forefront?
I think the biggest news was that Ducey kind of walked away a little bit from his get rid of the income tax pledge. I mean, he's been a nuanced candidate, a very kind of, I'm playing defense. He runs the ball a lot. He's kind of got the lead in a lot of people's minds, both in the primary and the general, and he's acted accordingly. And so, Duval has gone after him saying, getting rid of the big tax cuts are not the thing to do considering the state's financial situation. These other tax cuts haven't necessarily worked out. And Ducey's response is, well, I'm not going to propose anything crazy. And so I think that was one of the bigger things that came out of it.
Ducey, the quote from the debate was, no one's talking about eliminating income tax. I thought he was.
He kind of talked about that before, but as you've seen kind of throughout the primary and now, he's kind of backed off of that a little bit. He wants to get it lower, as close to zero as possible, but he kind of leaves these caveats of being reasonable. I think that's been kind of a centerpiece of his campaign. He's a conservative guy, but he's a reasonable conservative.
But if you go back to the primary, I mean, he was known, he and Ken Bennett were the candidates that were going to get rid of the income tax. And Bennett had a plan on how to replace the revenue. Ducey didn't. But since the primary victory, I agree with Mike. Maybe the language has become a little more nuanced, but his pledge to voters still says that his goal is to eliminate the income tax. Get it as close to zero as you can. So,
I think it's a very smart political move on his part to now start saying that we're not going to do this on day one. That emphasizing that while that is still the goal, that we're going to do this over 2 years. That's a very smart political 2 terms. Yeah. 2 terms, 8 years political move. It's very smart very savvy political move, because now he's faced with this reality of a state that's not collecting as much revenues as it likes. I mean, we're facing $520 million this year in deficit, $1 billion next year, $928 million in the year after, and then $787 million in 2018. That's about $3.2 billion in deficit that he or Duval has to solve within.
With that in mind, are we getting any more concrete ideas? I mean, we got the rainy day fund. You want to streamline this and you want to make this more efficient, but as Luigi said, we're talking real money here.
Yeah, no, you need something big, and we haven't heard that coming out on the campaign trail. There's some talk about trying to boost state trust land sales and accelerate that. But there's limitations on that. State trust land disposal, a lot of that is caught up with the Constitution. You can't move quickly on that, and voters are very wary about messing with that. The biggest hope is that the economy will improve, and there just aren't those indications that it's moving along quickly.
Yeah, we just had new job numbers, and the unemployment
Yeah.
rate ticked down, I think, a couple of tenths here. But with like 1,500 or so new private jobs, that's all we saw?
Yeah, statewide. Actually, in Phoenix, the private sector lost jobs. Almost all the jobs in September were schools, universities, public universities coming back into session. We're losing more construction jobs than any other region in the country, and it's very slow. It's very stagnant. We're not seeing the population growth. We're not seeing the high wage jobs that we want. The jobs that are coming here are warehouses and call centers mostly. We have the bankruptcy of the Apple supplier out there. In Mesa, GT Advance, they're going to cut jobs. And so, yeah, it's putting the candidates kind of in a box because nobody's going to propose any kind of tax increases. Ducey's a Republican, and their bread and butter is lower taxes. But the writing is on the wall economically that we're not going to just grow ourselves out of this suddenly.
Obviously, both candidates can't say we want to increase taxes or we want to start cutting budgets. That's just a no-no when you're campaigning to get people to vote for you. However, I think I spoke with Senate President Andy Biggs a couple of days ago, and he said the choices are going to be very stark. You either have to raise taxes, which obviously he opposes, or you got to cut. And if the candidates are now saying we will not cut education, which is $4 billion out of our budget, oh boy, I don't know what else they can cut and where else they would, make sure that we come up with $1 billion in revenues.
Yeah, I mean, I think bottom line, there just hasn't been an honest discussion with voters about the state's fiscal situation. People get it. They know that basically Arizona's finances are upside down. And on another level, people sort of get it that it's very impolitic to talk about cutting taxes, raising taxes or cutting budgets, but one of those has got to happen. Yeah, or some combination thereof.
Well, and if it does happen, if you are a Ducey or you are a Duval and you are in office and you're going, hey, listen, I did my best, but we've got to do this and we've got to do that. Good luck on that re-election campaign.
Yeah.
Well, did it hurt Jan Brewer?
No, it didn't hurt Jan Brewer, but
She did have 1070, but yeah, it was supposed to hurt Jan Brewer, and then she signed the bill, but it did not in the end. And I think that's something that Duval, I think maybe made a misstep if he doesn't win this, is to make the sales tax issue, which Ducey opposed, a key issue of this race. We're talking about a penny, 2 cents, and here's what it would pay for. This is the schools that he wants to protect. This would get us, help us get out of some of the financial strain. And here's what we would invest it in. But you don't see that kind of fortitude in politics across the board right now. But that would be a very stark issue because that was what propelled Doug Ducey into the forefront was the fact that he opposed that sales tax thing. But again, and there's ramifications for not having that tax.
But again, comparing to what the governor did, the governor wasn't campaigning at the last moment, not saying anything, and then all of a sudden, ba-boom, we're faced with this, we got to do it. I mean, she had kind of a situation where most folks thought it made perfect common sense. Many folks thought.
Well, she had to grow into it. I mean,
yes.
she came into office and they cut, and one day there was just nothing else to cut. And she came to the very hard conclusion that we needed to raise taxes. She tried to soften the blow by making it temporary. It passed with 64% of the vote, which made some people say, shoot, we should have asked for 2 cents or we should have gone for a longer period of time. Maybe that would have, that could have sold, but that ship sailed.
And that just goes to show you the difference between governing and campaigning.
Yes.
Sorry, excuse me, because when you are now governing the state and you're faced with those kinds of deficit, you got to do something. And you can't be nuanced about it. Like the current governor, Governor Jan Brewer, wasn't nuanced about it. She looked at the figures and said, we got to raise taxes.
Well, I guess that's my question. She looked, she acted, it got done. No one's looking hard. No one's got a chart. No one's got a Ken Bennett's Kleenex boxes or whatever that little demonstration he always. At least he had an idea. At least he said X, Y. We're not seeing any of that.
No. Ducey's been the front runner, and he's run a very, very nuanced campaign. His answers are nuanced. His plans are nuanced. He's running on experience. And I'm a good manager. I'm a good CEO. I was CEO of Cold Stone. Fred is running on, I'm not going to cut any more to education, but I don't think he's gone after Ducey in an aggressive enough way or offer an alternative to what Republicans offer. The problem is if he says, I'm for a sales tax, you're going to see all these commercials. It's not only he's a slick lobbyist, but he wants to raise your taxes. So you have to have the bullets in your gun, advertising-wise, to counter that. And I don't think candidates or their consultants are convinced that voters are willing to sit there and vote for somebody that's going to campaign on raising even sales taxes.
And as far as the debate is concerned, any change at all? Any big winners? Any big losers? Is this pretty much?
No, I think that pretty much everybody's stuck to their guns. We know their talking points. Nobody strayed. Like I mentioned earlier, Ducey did a politically savvy move by moving away from his let's eliminate the income tax, and I guess we'll find out in November,
Yes.
Or if he becomes governor, what he's going to do with this deficit.
What stood out to me is that Duval, given this was a women's forum, he opened up and made some statements about women's right to choose, right to life issues, and Ducey didn't engage, didn't take the bait on that, and Duval didn't press him on it, and that one just sort of fell off the table.
I do think it'll be interesting to see if Ducey, if he wins, if he governs like this, if he's nuanced and not definitive, and does the mostly right-wing legislature lead him down that path?
All right, we have to stop it right there. Great discussion. Good to have you all here. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great weekend.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.